Imagine walking up to a massive booming party. Like the music is loud, the buffet is fully stocked, and you can clearly see people inside having an absolute blast.
Oh, yeah.
But there's this velvet rope, and the bouncer at the door just crosses his arms and refuses to let you in, even though you have a gold embossed invitation with your name right on it. That is exactly what looking for a job in the Netherlands feels like right now.
It's an incredibly frustrating dynamic. You can physically see the opportunity, and you know you're qualified to be in the room, but the barrier to entry feels, well, entirely arbitrary.
Yeah.
And completely rigid.
Okay, let's unpack this. Wait, no, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't use pauses like that. Okay, let's unpack this. Because there is a central mystery here that just doesn't make sense on paper.
Right.
How can a country have historically low unemployment and record high job vacancies, yet leave highly skilled, highly motivated job seekers feeling completely locked out and, honestly, totally cynical?
It's the ultimate paradox.
It really is. So, to figure out why this velvet rope is so unyielding, we're cracking open a massive stack of data today for this deep dive. We've got everything from macroeconomic market assessments like the w.r.a.c entry strategy to staffing industry data from ING. We're looking at recruitment guides, tech certification reports, and crucially, some incredibly raw, emotional Reddit threads from actual job seekers who are living this nightmare right now.
It's a really comprehensive look at a system that is, frankly, under immense pressure from multiple angles. Yeah. The rules of engagement are entirely different in 2026.
Exactly. So whether you are prepping for a career move to Europe, maybe trying to hire a team in a tight market, or you're just fascinated by global economic shifts, this deep dive is going to reveal the hidden mechanics of the modern workforce.
Yeah, let's get into the numbers.
Let's look at the core data driving this paradox. As of early 2026, the Dutch unemployment rate is hovering incredibly low. We're talking between 4.0 and 4.8%.
Which is practically full employment.
Right. And the statutory minimum wage just bumped up again to 14.71 hours an hour. Plus, there are roughly 385,000 active job vacancies out there.
It's a staggering number of empty chairs.
And there's this massive demographic shift happening on top of it. They call it the silver tsunami.
Right, the silver tsunami. All these highly experienced Dutch professionals are retiring. And there simply aren't enough young graduates entering the workforce to replace them.
Yeah.
So it's creating what the Dutch call krapte, which just means a severe tightness in the market.
So on the surface, I mean, it sounds like an absolute paradise for a job seeker. You should be able to just walk in and demand a job, right?
What's fascinating here is that this is not a market of scarcity. It is a market of intense structural misalignment.
Misalignment.
Yes. The post-pandemic hiring peak of 2022 and 2023, where companies were basically hiring anyone with a pulse to fill empty seats.
Oh, yeah, the tech boom.
Exactly. That era is completely gone. Companies have shifted away from volume-based recruitment toward extreme precision. They don't just want a body in a chair. They want the absolute perfect fit for a highly specific set of parameters.
And are willing to just wait.
They are willing to let the work pile up while they wait for it.
Wait, I need to stop you there, because if I'm an employer and I'm desperate for like a software engineer or a project manager just to keep my business running, why on earth would I demand extreme precision?
Whoa.
Wouldn't I just want a smart, capable person who can learn on the job? Like, why leave the desk empty and actively lose money?
Because the cost of getting it wrong has become astronomically high. In a moment, we are going to talk about the massive new labor laws taking effect.
Oh, the 2026 regulation.
Right. Essentially, the regulatory environment right now makes it incredibly expensive to hire someone and even more expensive to let them go if they aren't a perfect fit.
Wow.
So companies aren't just looking for potential anymore. They're looking for immediate plug-and-play proficiency that carries zero risk.
It's like a massive game of musical chairs. Like, there are plenty of empty chairs, but everyone is speaking a different language. And the chairs require you to sit in a highly specific, predefined shape.
That is a perfect way to put it.
So, if they want zero risk, what exactly are the skill profiles employers are so desperately looking for? Our sources point to a few sectors experiencing what they call forever shortages. First, the technical trades.
The blue-collar backbone.
Exactly. We're talking electricians, welders, HVAC technicians. These are the people driving the Dutch housing boom and the massive green energy transition. But you can't just show up with a toolbox. The data shows that VCA safety certifications are completely mandatory.
And we should define what that actually means on the ground. VCA stands for Safety, Health, and Environment Checklist for contractors.
Right.
It's not just a casual, 20-minute safety briefing. If a construction site manager lets a tradesperson on site without a verified VCA certificate and an accident happens,
The liability is huge.
the liability for the company is catastrophic. It's a hard legal barrier. So the demand is insatiable, but the certification is non-negotiable.
Then you have healthcare and life sciences, which is under extreme pressure for nurses and professionals. But again, they need EU-recognized certifications like GMP or ICH GCP.
Exactly. GMP is good manufacturing practice. And we aren't just talking about a piece of paper here.
Right, it's about real-world consequences.
Exactly. If a pharmaceutical lab tech without a rigorous GMP certification makes one tiny documentation error, the company legally has to destroy $1 million batch of medicine.
Oh, wow.
Or ICH GCP, which governs clinical trials. If you don't know the exact international protocol, the entire trial is invalidated. That's why they won't even look at your resume without it.
And finally, IT and tech. But there's a huge pivot happening here from what we read. Employers don't just want general software developers anymore.
No, the generalist era is over.
Right, they want AI integration, cloud infrastructure experts specifically for AWS and Google Cloud and heavy cybersecurity credentials like CISSP or Security Plus I.
Precisely. CISSP is the gold standard for cybersecurity. Just think about the stakes. If an uncertified IT manager leaves a vulnerability open, a ransomware attack could literally bankrupt the company overnight. Systems are simply too complex, and the financial risks are too high.
And here's my pushback. If everyone knows we need tradespeople, and everyone knows we need cybersecurity experts, why don't people just take a quick online course, grab the certificates, and get to work? Is it really that simple?
No, because the fundamental nature of a certification has changed. In 2026, certifications act as career currency.
Career currency.
Yes,
Yeah.
because employers are incredibly cautious. A standard university degree is no longer enough. A degree tells them you understand the theory.
Right.
But a certification is verified, practical proof that you can operate their specific, highly technical systems without breaking them. They are critical trust signals.
That makes sense.
We also see specialized project management certifications like Prince2 and PMP becoming highly prized.
Yeah.
As AI systems become more complex, companies desperately need certified professionals who can actually manage the messy human implementation of these technologies.
Across different borders and departments.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say a candidate actually does the work. They have the degree, they have the exact certifications you just mentioned as career currency. Why are these highly qualified professionals still hitting a digital brick wall when they apply?
The ATS.
Yes, because the raw, visceral frustration we found in our Reddit sources is just palpable. Job hunting is repeatedly described as mentally exhausting, and the biggest villain in these threads, the applicant tracking system, or ATS, filter wall.
The ATS is essentially the bouncer at your velvet rope, and its instructions have become impossibly strict.
We read through the data on this, and it's wild. Employers are trying to save money by combining 2 or 3 distinct roles into one single, impossible job description.
They want a unicorn.
Exactly. They want a data scientist who is also a graphic designer and a supply chain expert. And then they program the ATS to auto-reject any candidate who only matches 70 or 80% of those combined keywords.
It's absurd.
It's like searching for a highly specific recipe online. If the ATS is programmed to look for vanilla extract and your resume says vanilla bean, the algorithm concludes you don't have the ingredients. It literally cannot read between the lines. A human recruiter never even sees the resume.
It's a completely automated feedback vacuum. You send your perfectly tailored resume into the void, and an algorithm decides your fate based on a rigid historical data model. It cannot account for human nuance or transferable skills.
And then there's the gap penalty.
Oh, the career gappers.
Right. If you took a few months off to travel or you relocated and it took time to settle in, the algorithm flags that resume gap as a major risk factor and just tosses you out. Automatically. And you really feel the burnout in these Reddit threads. One job seeker who studied sustainability even vented that their specific job market is shrinking because of what they view as climate skeptic policies from right-wing governments.
It's a very common sentiment online right now.
It is. And to be totally clear to you listening, we're not taking a political stance here or endorsing that view. We're just impartially reporting what job seekers are actually feeling in these threads. But whether you agree with their political assessment or not, it highlights this deep underlying feeling of powerlessness.
Absolutely.
The system feels rigged, and candidates feel completely at the mercy of forces, whether algorithmic or political, that they just can't control. It's honestly like modern dating apps.
That's a great comparison.
Everyone is using AI to swipe, nobody's actually connecting, and the algorithms are tossing out great matches over minor technicalities.
And that feeling of powerlessness creates what our sources call the absurd spectacle on platforms like LinkedIn.
Oh, the ghosting.
Yes. The recruitment industry has become a volume game. You have bots sending automated, highly enthusiastic messages to candidates, offering them false hope.
Like, we'd love to interview you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then the candidate spends hours researching the company, tailoring a thoughtful response, only to receive a generic auto-rejection a week later, or worse, they just get ghosted completely.
It's maddening.
Because the recruiter's interest was never real. It was just an algorithm casting a massive net to see what keywords it could catch.
It's soul-crushing. But if the algorithmic wall wasn't high enough, there is another massive, often misunderstood barrier, especially if you weren't born in the Netherlands.
The language.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting. So even if you manage to beat that ruthless ATS algorithm we just talked about, international workers are slamming into an even older, more analog wall. The Dutch language. We need to shatter the myth right now that English is enough to survive in the Dutch tech hub.
Yes, this is a harsh reality check for many international workers. They move to the Netherlands expecting an entirely English-speaking corporate bubble.
And the numbers are staggering. In 2026, 85% of vacancies demand C1, near native Dutch proficiency.
C1 is incredibly high.
It is. And even if you manage to hit B2 level, which takes years of massive effort, it's often not enough for what companies call cultural fit. We read threads from international students on the orientation year visa who are completely disillusioned.
They feel like cash cows.
Exactly, cash cows. They are brought into the country, they pay massive international tuition fees to the universities, and then they graduate only to face an intense ticking clock to find corporate sponsorship against native Dutch speakers who obviously already speak the language perfectly.
And the financial incentives for expats are shrinking at the exact same time. We really have to look at the tapering of the 30% tax ruling.
Right. Break that down for us and explain why it's happening.
So historically, the Netherlands offered highly skilled migrants a 30% tax-free allowance on their salary for 5 years to offset relocation costs.
Which is a huge draw.
Huge. But under the new rules, it tapers. You get the full 30% for the first 20 months, then it drops to 20% for the next 20 months, and finally down to 10% for the last 20.
Why the change?
The government is tapering this tax break because of massive domestic political pressure. Every day, Dutch citizens are looking at the severe housing crisis, seeing expats outbidding them on apartments in the city center because of this significant tax advantage.
Ah, so they're demanding the government level the playing field.
Exactly.
So combine that shrinking paycheck with the ongoing housing crisis. Expats are spending nearly all their income just to rent a place in the Randstad, the Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Utrecht corridor, where the few English-speaking tech jobs actually exist.
Exactly. And they can't easily move to the cheaper rural provinces to save money on rent because those local economies have even stricter Dutch language requirements for employment.
Right.
They're getting squeezed from both ends. Which brings us to a really fascinating cultural phenomenon our sources highlighted, the overqualified PhD dilemma. This raises an important question. If there is such a severe skills shortage, why do Dutch employers actively reject highly specialized international academics?
Yeah, that seems completely counterintuitive to me. If you have a brilliant PhD applying for a job, why turn them away?
It all comes down to the polder model.
Okay.
The polder model actually goes back centuries. A polder is a piece of land reclaimed from the sea. The historical idea was that if everyone didn't perfectly cooperate to keep the windmills turning and the dikes strong, everyone would drown, regardless of their wealth or social class.
That's a powerful image.
Right. That life or death need for absolute consensus, equality, and working together is still baked into Dutch corporate culture today.
So how does that affect a PhD?
Employers look at a PhD candidate and assume two things. One, they will demand a massive salary, and two, they won't adapt to that egalitarian horizontal hierarchy.
Oh, I see.
They fear the candidate will expect to be treated like an elite expert based on their academic title, which completely disrupts the consensus-seeking Dutch work culture.
Wow, that historical context makes so much sense. Okay, so we have job seekers at their absolute breaking point. The market is tight, the algorithms are punishing, and the language and cultural barriers are intense.
It's a perfect storm.
It really is. And this is exactly where the Dutch government is stepping in and fundamentally rewriting the rules of employment. Let's talk about the massive regulatory shakeup happening right now in 2025 and 2026.
This is perhaps the biggest driver of the paradox we've been discussing, and it perfectly explains why companies are so terrified to hire.
First, we have the strict enforcement of the Wet DBA. This is a law cracking down on false self-employment, or what they call ZZP'ers. Now, ZZP actually stands for Zelfstandig Zonder Personeel, which translates to an independent worker without staff, basically freelancers.
Right, but the government realized companies were abusing this system.
How so?
They were hiring people as freelancers to avoid paying pensions, holiday pay, and sick leave, even though these people were essentially acting as full-time employees.
So how does the new law actually identify a false freelancer?
The criteria are very practical now. If you are a freelancer, but you are required to use a company laptop, you have to attend the weekly internal marketing stand-up, and you legally cannot send a substitute to do your work if you get sick.
Then you're basically an employee.
Yes,
Oh.
exactly. The government says you are an employee, not a ZZ peer, and they're enforcing heavy fines on companies that violate this.
The result of this enforcement was massive. According to our sources, 73,000 freelancers dropped out of the flexible labor pool, while the number of permanent contracts rose by 100,000.
A huge migration.
It was a huge migration from flexible to permanent roles, and it doesn't stop there. By July 2026, the staffing industry is getting completely overhauled. Temporary workers will be legally entitled to the exact same rights, pensions, and transition pay as permanent payroll employees.
It's a fundamental shift in labor rights.
It really is. It feels like the government is forcing companies to, put a ring on it. You can't just casually date your workforce with cheap, disposable freelance contracts anymore. If you want the talent, you have to commit. But going back to what we talked about earlier, won't this make companies more afraid to hire?
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this legislation is beautifully designed to protect workers and offer stability, which is a net positive for society.
Right.
But it makes the actual act of hiring incredibly expensive and high risk for the employer. You can't just let someone go easily if it doesn't work out after a few months.
Which brings us back to the ATS.
Yes. This perfectly explains why the ATS algorithms we discussed have become so ruthlessly strict. Employers simply cannot afford a bad hire anymore.
Right.
But the financial cost of a mistake is too high, so they'd rather leave the chair empty or let the algorithm reject 99% of candidates than risk putting the wrong person on the permanent payroll.
So let me get this straight. The government wants to protect workers, which is great, but by making it so hard to fire somewhere, they've accidentally incentivized companies to use these ruthless AI gatekeepers that keep everyone out.
That's exactly the mechanism at play. The safety net has inadvertently built a fortress wall.
Okay, the pieces are fully connecting now. We have a tight market, punishing algorithms designed to avoid financial risk, and strict new laws enforcing commitment. How on earth do candidates actually hack this system? And what business opportunities does this chaos create?
Well, chaos always creates a market for navigation.
True.
Enter the Market Assessment for Rights, Resumes, and Connections, or WRAC. Their 2026 entry strategy identifies a massive service gap. Standard resume writers who just format your work history into a nice PDF aren't enough anymore.
Right, you need more than formatting.
Candidates are desperate for what they call cultural and regulatory navigators.
People who can translate a candidate's past into the highly specific, risk-free future the Dutch market demands. Let's look at the actionable strategies they're deploying. First, ZZP to permanent rebranding.
This is a big one.
Because of the Wet DBA, all those displaced freelancers need to translate their gig work into a narrative of corporate stability. They have to rebrand a list of clients into stakeholder management and project milestones into strategic business outcomes just to get past the corporate ATS.
It's entirely about speaking the language of the permanent corporate world.
Second strategy, finding hidden gems. The data says you have to bypass the LinkedIn algorithmic meat grinder entirely. Look for job postings with under 10 applicants where a human being might actually read your resume.
Yes.
And culturally, the Dutch are very open to what's known as informational coffees.
This is a crucial tactic, but you have to do it the Dutch way. You reach out directly to a hiring manager, and you don't ask for a job that's too aggressive. You ask for 15 minutes to discuss their field and their challenges. It's direct, it's brief, and it completely bypasses the ATS wall. It humanizes the process in a system that has been entirely dehumanized.
And third, pay transparency. In June 2026, the EU Pay Transparency Directive takes effect. Companies will have to disclose salary ranges. Savvy candidates are using this upcoming law to demand evidence-based salary negotiations rather than getting lowballed by recruiters who are trying to manage those tight corporate budgets.
And what's brilliant about the business strategy here is how these navigation services and retraining efforts are being funded.
Who's paying for it?
Savvy players are actually using government money to solve these problems. The Dutch government offers the SLIM training subsidy and LLO catalyst grants.
Oh, nice.
These are massive state-backed funds designed to promote lifelong learning and retraining in those shortage sectors we talked about. Forward-thinking companies and candidates can utilize these grants to fund the career coaching, the specific IT or technical certification roadmaps, and the retraining needed to bypass the algorithmic walls.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? If you are a job seeker staring down this 2026 market, you have to play a dual game. Yes, absolutely. Use AI to speed up your search, draft your cover letters, and find the right keywords for the ATS.
Yeah.
But you must rewrite that output in your own authentic voice. If you sound like a bot, you'll be rejected like a bot.
Exactly.
And more importantly, you have to learn the cultural norms. You need to understand the vrimibo, the traditional Friday afternoon drinks at the office, because in a high-risk hiring environment, proving you're a good cultural fit, proving you belong in that egalitarian polder team dynamic, often beats technical perfection.
At the end of the day, they are hiring a colleague, not a line of code. They want to know they can sit next to you and collaborate when things go wrong.
So let's recap this incredible journey. We started with the paradox of the forever shortage, historic job vacancies existing right alongside highly skilled people who can't find work.
The velvet rope.
Exactly. We saw how this misalignment is driven by the algorithmic ATS filter walls, which act like rigid search engines demanding impossible perfection to mitigate financial risk. We uncovered the harsh reality for expats facing a massive C1 Dutch language barrier, shrinking tax benefits, and a housing crisis. And finally, we decoded how the government's Wet DBA and temp worker rights are forcing companies toward permanent employment, which perversely makes them terrified to actually hire anyone.
It is a labor market fundamentally at war with its own safety mechanisms.
Yeah.
The protections are creating the paralysis.
Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with.
And if you do have an interview or a big career moment coming up and you feel like you need some tactical, one-on-one support for these high-pressure situations, WRAC Career Services offers comprehensive interview performance coaching. It's designed specifically for these challenges.
You can visit our website for more details on how we can help you turn that nervous energy into a really sharp focus.
We talked earlier about the Dutch polder model,
Yeah.
born from the history of keeping the water out. It's a work culture famous for deep human consensus, collaboration, and egalitarian respect.
Right.
Yet the gatekeepers to this incredibly human-centric culture are currently rigid, soulless AI algorithms scanning for exact keywords.
It's so ironic.
It raises a critical question for the future. If these algorithms are only programmed to hire people who perfectly fit standard, historical data profiles, are companies accidentally filtering out the diverse, out-of-the-box thinkers that are actually required to solve the crises of the future?
That is a chilling thought. If the algorithm only hires what worked yesterday, how do you innovate for tomorrow?
Exactly. Could the ultimate competitive advantage for a forward-thinking company in 2026 be to ban the algorithms entirely, take down the velvet rope, and go back to hiring based on genuine human intuition and potential?
Because right now, the party is happening, but the bouncer is turning away the exact people who could make it unforgettable, something for you to mull over. Until next time.